Welcome, folks, to the Andy Social Podcast. My name is Andy Dowling, and if you didn't know already, I play bass in the Australian metal band Lord, and at the time of this episode coming out, we are playing our last ever show. Sounds like we're breaking up. Sorry, let me rephrase that. We are playing our last show for 2018 this Saturday, November 3rd at the Bullface Stag in Sydney. We are headlining day 2 of the Steel Assassins Festival there at the Bullface Stag. So if you want to come out, have a drink, watch me prance around on stage being a heavy metal warrior, you can go and get tickets from lord.net.au, andysocial.net, or moshtix.com.au. If you have any troubles, let me know and I'll flick the direct link through to you. If that's not your style and you just want to have a bit of a curious sticky beak, you can go over to lord.net.au. We've got all of our video clips there. We've got our streaming music, our Spotify playlist, a whole bunch of stuff there. So you can go and have a sticky beak and see what we're all about. Hopefully you enjoy the tunes. In addition to playing in a heavy metal band, I also host the Self-Starter podcast, which is all about small business, self-employment, and freelancing. So depending on what your story is, whether you're in a job that you don't like and you want to get out of it and do something with more meaning, maybe you want to earn a bit of pocket money on the side, or maybe you're just about to start your own business. Whatever it is, Self-Starter might be your answer. So you can search for Self-Starter in your podcast player that you're listening through right now, or you can go to selfstarter.com.au and it'll have all the episodes there, including a blog as well. So there's lots and lots of content. And I must say, as always, thank you to the Andy Social faithful that have been supporting and spreading the word about Self-Starter. It means a hell of a lot to me. So cheers. This week's shout out. If you're new to the podcast, each and every week I thank somebody that supports me, the podcast, the band, anything that I'm associated with. And it can be in a range of different ways. It could be a bit of social media love. It could be a message of encouragement, a guest recommendation. It could be buying some merch from the online store. It could be shouting me a beer via the PayPal button over at andysocial.net. It doesn't matter. It all helps. It keeps me going. It keeps this podcast pumping. It just means so much to me. So thank you, as always, to everybody that continues to support me. But there's only one each and every week. This week's shout out is for Carl Huttenmeister. You will know Carl from a previous episode of the podcast, episode 144. Carl is a prosthetic technician. He's got a Facebook page called I Make Prosthetics. He's also a musician and an artist. He is a jack of all trades. You can go and listen to that episode with him, episode 144. A super cool guy, really, really nice guy. And there's a lot of great tips about time management and just creativity in general in that episode. So make sure to go and check that one out. The reason why Carl is getting a shout out this week on the podcast is because just recently he went and bought the USB pass, which has the first 100 episodes of the Andy Social podcast in this convenient wallet-sized, credit card-sized USB pass that you can plug into your car, into your laptop, blah, blah, blah. It saves you on a bit of data. There's 100 episodes and there's at least more than an hour per episode on the podcast. So there's at least 100 hours of content on this USB pass. It's pretty, in my opinion, biased opinion, of course, it's pretty damn good. So Carl, grab one. Thank you so much, Carl. Please shoot me a message when you hear this and I'll flick you out some more little goodies because we all love getting something in the mail. This week's episode is with Macinley Butson. Macinley is a 17-year-old student and scientist. Now, some of you might take that with a grain of salt and go, oh yeah, scientist, you probably just tinkered around, at home or at school or something like that. No. You don't understand. Macinley has achieved so much in the last several years. It is just, I'm lost for words. It's just absolutely incredible what she has done. She has had a whole heap of media attention over the last couple of years. She's done a TEDx talk. She's invented a whole range of different things that are actually helping people in the community, and it's going global. Her impact so far has been so significant that a lot of people are paying attention to what she's doing, including me. And I got in touch with her and we had a really, really great chat on this podcast. Now, I won't go into too much of it because I think Macinley explains a lot of this herself very well, but I'll put a whole bunch of stuff in the show notes over at andysocial.net. You can learn more about Macinley by going to macinleybutson.com as well, but I'll have everything in the show notes as always. Enough of me. Please enjoy this really, really cool chat with Macinley Butson. You're only 17, is that correct? Still 17?
Yes, still 17.
Obviously, that is a big focal point in a lot of the attention you've been getting over the last several years, and for good reason, but is it something that has become a bit of a distraction for you?
I think Both yes and no. I think it's probably my greatest strength as well as one of my greatest weaknesses, if that makes sense. And it's something that I've always, I suppose, liked to promote as such. The fact that I think personally, speaking to my own friends and speaking to the broader community, I think that young people like myself have a lot to bring into the table, because quite often in an industry, there are all these preconceived ideas about, what works, what doesn't, the frameworks, stay in this structure. And a lot of young people, I think, which is both good and bad, but tend to break that a little bit because we don't already have that experience. But I also do think it is one of my weaknesses, exactly because I don't have the life experiences necessary to use a lot of the skills that I've developed, just because I'm not in an industry and I don't know how things work.
Well, and I guess that all comes in with time, obviously, as you get older. But yeah. I guess one of the things that I noticed, like when I was, writing my notes out and having a look around the place and seeing all the things that that you've been involved with, a lot of the big focal points that, especially from the media's point of view, has been around your age. And I guess sometimes that can be a bit of a distraction away from the actual value that you've provided to people and what you've actually been able to achieve. But I guess in context, a lot of people, and no doubt people have told you this a million times already, when I was 17, or when many of us were 17, we didn't do even a minute amount of achievement and progress in comparison to what you've been able to do in such a short space of time in the grand scheme of things. So it is something that's obviously celebrated and it's fantastic. But I thought I'm gonna address that straight away with you, and just because it is something that is important. But I wanted to sort of get that out there, and then we'll obviously move into the guts of it all.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I do totally agree with you. I have gotten that comment a lot of the, back when I was 17, I remember doing this and going to the corner store. And I think a lot of the time people don't realize I am still a 17-year-old and I do still do a lot of those things. I do enjoy hanging out with my friends. I do have to do my schoolwork and my homework. I think for me, all of this science projects, it's one of my hobbies and one of my passions. So where someone might devote their time to going to swim practice or devote their time to doing art, I've devoted my time to doing science, which tends to be a little less common. Probably just makes me a bit more of a nerd, but it's just something that I enjoy spending my time doing, and try and do that to help other people is what I always try to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one thing that I've noticed over the last several years is that, you use the word, and I'll focus on it for a moment, the word nerd, but it's so much more celebrated and accepted in pop culture and everything that we do now, where, it sounds silly to say, but intelligence is celebrated. And it sounds so silly to say it, but it's something where we really are praising and highlighting people that have got great capabilities and are achieving amazing things from an academic point of view, and just really sort of getting into the guts of things that used to be just nerd culture back in the day for varying reasons. And it's something that's actually really cool now, and a lot of people identify with it and celebrate it. And I think it's positive that you're another example of a lot of people out there globally that are just doing amazing things and are just breaking a lot of the old stereotypes that were around of what the expectations were of somebody, going through the period of life of being a teenager.
Yeah, absolutely. I think exactly what you said. I celebrate being a nerd. I've never thought of, that comment as being a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's always been something that I think just means, I'm curious about learning, and if that means intelligence or not, I think if you have a curiosity about learning and you like delving deeper into things on more of an intellectual side, I don't see why that should be a negative stereotype. So You're
Absolutely.
absolutely right in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, when you verbalize it, when we talk about it, it sounds so ridiculous that it was ever anything but
Yep.
that. But unfortunately, it was, and it's a very unusual thing, and it's humorous to sort of look back, especially for a lot of us that have gone through, similar sort of progression of coming of age and going through sort of the teenage years and the stereotypes and the expectations that people have on you that these things even existed. So it's I think it's comforting for a lot of people to see people like yourself doing what you're doing, and it's just it's really, really inspirational. One question that I've got is around curiosity. Where did it come from? Is there a point in time where you started to develop a curiosity in a particular thing or an interest that you had? I'm really curious about your parents as well, because there must be some influence there as far as encouraging you to question things and look into things and be curious. But where did that all come from?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it was a specific pinpoint in time that I could say that, I suddenly had a love for STEM. I think it has always been a part of me. I was that kid, which is like kind of your stereotypical annoying, nagging kid with their parents being like, "Hey, mum, why is the sky blue?" And like constantly tugging on the base of their shirt, asking why, and kind of just constantly being there. And I think that's just a part of me. That's a part of who I am. I've always been that curious child. I was also always a very active child. I was always making things. I was always doing things. And so I always wanted to kind of go that step further, even before the time I could talk. And I think a lot of credit goes to my parents, absolutely, because they saw that. And rather than just giving me the answers, they always encouraged me to go and find the answers out for myself. Whether that be just so I was, out of their hair for a little bit. But they were kind of the spark that continued the fire. So I had that natural curiosity, but they were able to foster that. And I think eventually that grew into more of a passion. And then they started teaching me, well, you've got this passion, it's obvious you like STEM and you like science. And they encouraged me to use that to do good and to help other people who might be less fortunate than myself in a circumstance or in a place. And so that's, I suppose, what it is now. It started when I was really young, and it's just continuing, and I, hope it grows even further in the future.
And I might make a note really quickly, and I'll get you to explain it just in case anybody listening may not have a great deal of knowledge in this particular area. But do you just want to explain exactly what STEM means?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So STEM is an acronym that stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. So it's kind of a broad term for all of that more, I suppose, right side of brain thinking. There are suggestions to include medicine as another M on the end. And I think that's absolutely right, because I think STEM originally started as science, and then you had your computer science, and you had all these very, physics, chemistry, biology. But I think now, especially more than ever, everything's so interdisciplinary. So I think that's where we've seen the rise of the coin word of STEM, because it's no longer just science. You've got all of these extra bits added onto the end, which all make up the one discipline.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's good. And at least people will get an understanding of what that means. And it's good because it is a bit of an umbrella concept, but it brings a broader concept where things can link together better. I think there's been, over the years, especially me growing up and going through the education system, things are very segregated and separated in silos in a way of, and not really sort of understanding the marriage between varying subjects and how they can, how the relationships work and how they complement off each other. And so to be able to put a number of these topics under an umbrella and label it, I think that will help with giving people a bit of clarity around how these things can be intertwined together.
Absolutely.
Going back to you in your younger years, I was doing a little bit of looking around online, and it was on YouTube, and I found a video from, I think it was 2012, and it was improving solar power efficiency. And
Yep.
it was a slightly younger version of yourself, and it's really well done. It's quite humorous in the way that you've done it, and it's really informative. And I found a couple of other videos there as well. And if you're comfortable for me to do so, I'd love to put them in the show notes of this episode, just so people can see where you've come from and how long you've been so passionate about this. Because when I'm watching these videos, I'm just thinking there's not very many people out there that would be actively creating content like this to get a message out there to other people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They were a bit of a blast from the past. I haven't looked at them in quite a long time, so you can imagine the one memory I do have from that video is me wearing a less than attractive moustache.
That's the thumbnail of the YouTube video. Yep. And I went, okay, I'm going to have a quick look at this and see what it's all about. But I mean, where did that come from? I mean, I know we're in a different generation now where video and our smartphones and everything is second nature. It's all attached to us now. But was there inspiration from anybody for you to go, you know what, I want to put a video, I want to create a video of a topic or something I'm passionate about, or a concept that I want to get out there to more people? Where did that all come from?
Yeah, those more video side things, they actually all stemmed from a competition. And so the competition was basically if you've done a science project or if you're doing research and that sort of thing, the competition was designed, and it was make a video that tells us about whatever it is you're doing. And so I decided, I was like, this could be, a cool opportunity. So I made my video and I entered it into the competition. And then I think it was just I didn't want it to end there. Like, I didn't want it just to be a couple of, people on a board marking who saw the video. And so I don't know what spurred it in me, but I decided to post it on YouTube and see, where it would go from there. And so I've done that with a couple of my projects as well now. And when I'm entering them into various other competitions, if I have to make a video, quite often I'll just chuck it on YouTube as well, because I think it's a great resource. There's a lot of terrible stuff on YouTube, and there's probably a lot of junk, but quite often you find gems on YouTube, which can really inform your learning. And so I thought, why not put what I've done on there as well, just to see if anyone comes across it.
Was there any hesitation for you to put yourself out there like that? Because I think it might be different these days, but I think a lot of us still get a little bit shy in front of the camera, and when we see ourselves, we cringe a bit and go, that's not a good look. But was there any hesitation of putting yourself out there in public like that?
Yeah, I think back then there definitely wasn't, even just from the nature of the video.
Yeah.
It's a very boisterous and very playful video, and that was definitely my personality. I think I was about 11 or 12. So I can tell you there was absolutely no hesitation. Now I look back on it and I do a little bit of cringing, especially from some of the absolutely terrible video editing. I had these fantastic ideas. Like, for example, one of them was I decided I was going to try and do a green screen type thing. But 11-year-old me didn't realize that for a green screen, it needed to be green. And so I decided that I would use a black sheet instead, which evidently didn't work. And some very dodgy editing has led to a subpar video. But I look more back and do the cringing. But no, there was never any hesitation, especially at that younger age. I was a lot more instantaneous and didn't really think things through too much.
Well, I mean, that's probably part of the charm of it as well, is that there wasn't a hesitation. And I think even now, as you're getting all the recognition that you've been receiving, that people like myself can sort of dig in and see your journey and see what you've been doing and be really amazed at just where your mind was at and what your passions were and what they still are now. And it's just, I think it's that story that sort of sits behind it all that people can connect with and enjoy. So I think even though you might look back and go, oh geez, it's a bit cringy, I think it's a great little chapter in your ever continuing story.
Thank you.
And I'll go off on a tangent really quickly because we sort of touched on a little bit there about not having the hesitation and your personality, sort of feeding into, just putting yourself out there and getting your message out there. Fast forwarding to more recent times where you've done the TEDx talk, you've done a lot more sort of public speaking things, you've got in front of the camera, and you've done a lot of, major media, stories on yourself as well. Have you sought any help or assistance or training for yourself to become an effective public speaker? Because when I'm looking at the stuff you're doing now, my initial reaction was, you're getting some help. Like you're really, really good at this. But then the more I sort of looked at it, I thought, I think this is just natural because you're so passionate about what you're doing. So have you sort of had any sort of mentoring or help along the way to sort of help you get your message out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something I sometimes struggle with a little bit because, as you say, there is a lot of recognition with my name attached to it. But what people don't see is the support network behind me. My family, first of all, is the most supportive group that I have, and I'm very, very close with all of them. For the TEDx talk, I did have people who were able behind me to edit my speech, and there were countless numbers of rehearsals beforehand to get that idea of what a TEDx talk is supposed to look like. A lot of my public speaking has just come from practice, and I can still say whenever I get up to do a speech, I am still sometimes a nervous wreck. It's been something that being candid and trying to be transparent, I struggle with. It's probably every kid's worst nightmare to have to get up in front of their class and do a public speech. And for a while there, I did feel like I kind of just got thrown out into the limelight. There wasn't really, other than that TEDx talk, from there onwards, it was people started asking me to come and give speeches. So there was a bit of pressure, I suppose, to, if someone's coming to ask me to give a speech, I wanted that speech to be good. And so I did do a lot of practicing and, trying to make sure that the speech was polished and it was putting across how I wanted it to sound. But that's been a process as well. You don't start off perfect at anything. And so through practice and, writing speeches and really figuring out what it is I am passionate about and what the message is that I want to get across, I think it's evolved a lot more. And that's been something that's, I think, probably about half and half, half people helping me and supporting me along the way. And half of it is I do love what I talk about and I do have a passion for these areas that I talk about. So,
yeah, I've come across a lot of people over the years that it's one of those stereotypical phobias that people have about speaking in front of a group of people, public speaking. And one thing that I notice quite a bit is that usually the fear comes from not so much being in front of somebody or in front of a group of people, but not truly knowing what you're talking about, or the fear that you don't know enough to have the legitimacy, or you don't have the to be valid to get in front of people and talk on a subject or whatever it is. And I think once people cross that threshold and understand that they do have the right to be able to speak about something, and it is something they're passionate about and something that they know a lot about, then I think the majority of those fears start to go away. And so once you have confidence in yourself, then I think you can project it out there and then start working on your craft with your delivery, your pauses, stretching things out a little bit, gesturing and your body language and all those kind of things as well. But I remember going through school and having those horrible oral presentations where you'd have a 3 minute presentation in front of the class and teacher of a particular subject for part of your assessment, and being told that you should only be writing, you'd have a palm card and you'd only be able to write a couple of notes and that's it. And of course, all of us that never prepared and we never knew what we were talking about and we didn't care enough about the subject, we wrote every line, every bit of information,
single word.
Yeah, on both sides of that palm card, and we held it right close to our face, and we sped through it so quickly that no one understood what we were saying. Our legs were like jelly, and we were just running to get off that stage as quickly as possible. And a 3-minute presentation was usually about 30 seconds. And so I think that's where a lot of people's fear comes from, because they go through these experiences in school talking about things that they're not necessarily passionate about or that they enjoy, and not really getting coached as to how to really embrace that sort of moment as well. So for you, I mean, from my perspective anyway, you've had this passion to talk about things that mean a lot to you, and I think a lot of this has come naturally. But as you said, it is still something that is a challenge to you, and no doubt the more you do it, the better you get. And I mean, at your age, to be able to do the TEDx talk and to do a lot of the public speaking events and doing the media, you're definitely positioning yourself for a lot of success in the future as well.
Thank you.
So going back a little bit again, and I'll touch on the main concept, or I'm trying to steer away from the word invention because it sounds so movie like, but you've created a whole range of different things that help other people, and it goes right back over several years. Now there's probably way more, but the ones that I've found, there was 4 main ones that I could see. And please fill me in if there's some other noteworthy ones that are worth bringing up. But I think I'll just start with the earliest one that I could find was the spoonge.
Yes.
So I guess going back to you having the curiosity, asking questions, identifying things around you, this has sort of been the basis of you identifying something that you wanted to improve.
Yes, definitely. This one started from quite personal experiences. I went through quite a bit of sickness when I was younger. I was quite unwell for a couple of years, and taking medicines, and as you're a child, quite often you take more the liquid medicines rather than tablets. And so I had my little medicine cup that comes on the top of the bottles, and was taking my medicine. I just happened to notice one day that there was a fair amount of the medicine still left in the bottom of that cup. Obviously, because the medicine can be quite thick sometimes, and so a part of me, just wondered, I wonder how much of what I'm supposed to be taking that actually is, and basically maybe that's the reason why I'm not getting better. Maybe I'm not having enough medicine because half of it's still left in the container, and so that's where that project started from. I tested 3 different, I suppose, ways to deliver medicine, which were an oral syringe, a medicine cup, and, trusty teaspoon. And I measured them for their accuracy. So if a teaspoon, which is supposed to be 5 milliliters, is it actually measuring 5 milliliters? And that for their delivery of medicine. So basically, if you're taking the medicine, how much of that medicine is left behind or is added as such. And so from that, I found that spoons, like teaspoons, are the most wildly inaccurate measuring devices that exist on planet Earth. I was finding, teaspoons that were way, way over and way, way under what they were supposed to be. But I also found that when you stick a whole spoon in your mouth, none of the medicine is left behind on that spoon. And similarly, I found that the syringe is the most accurate. However, if you dip a syringe into a bottle to, suck the liquid up, quite often a lot of the medicine is actually coats the outside, and because it's quite thick, it sticks to the outside, so you can actually get more medicine than what you're supposed to be getting. So from that, combined the fact that you're getting all of the medicine with the spoon as well as the accuracy with the syringe to create the spoonge.
I love it. And
with a fun little name.
Yeah, definitely. That's right. I mean, yeah, genius, of course. It's funny about the inaccuracy of the teaspoon, tablespoon concept, because for as long as we've known, measuring so many things in our day-to-day lives has been 2 teaspoons of this, 2 tablespoons of this, and it's just wildly inaccurate. And so it's funny because I was reading that as well when you made a comment elsewhere, and I just thought, oh, that's it's funny how there's so many things that we accept on a day-to-day basis as just the law of the land, and we don't question it. And then somebody comes along and just looks at it from slightly a different angle and just goes, actually, no, this is not what it is. And suddenly we've got a new path to go down. And so something along those lines, I mean, obviously, I guess, small in concept, it's something that you identified a problem for yourself and your own experience, but this probably planted a lot of seeds for you to start thinking about other things that you could potentially improve as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going back to what you said about, changing things and looking at things a bit differently. I think quite often this is where a lot of the world's greatest, inventions, for lack of a better word, come from, looking at something slightly differently. Quite often the simplest answers are the best answers. And so we don't need all of this fancy whiz-bang technology, something really, really complicated. Quite often it is just coming at it from that slightly different angle and finding something simple that can be improved, which makes a big difference.
So one of the other inventions that I saw was noted was, and I didn't get a lot of detail on this, so you'll have to explain a bit on it for me, but there was a device for keeping garden snails away without poison.
Yes.
So
that one,
where did this come from? What is it?
Yeah, so that one also coined with a particularly cute nickname. I think one thing that you'll find a common thread between all of my inventions is I always like to come up with a particularly strange or kind of smart name for it. I think that's one of the funnest processes is actually figuring out what you're going to call this thing. So that device was called the Slow Euro snail.
Nice.
Yeah. And so basically what it was is it stemmed from obviously using pesticides in gardens. We had at that stage just gotten a dog, which I had been, begging mum for years and years to get a dog. And so there was, research which comes out which says, if dogs or cats or even sometimes like native birds and lizards eat the pesticides which are in the garden, they can pass away from eating them because they're poisonous. And so I think I was in year 7 or 8 at the time, and of course we'd just gotten this puppy. I didn't want the puppy to pass away from eating the pesticides and the little snail bait that was in our garden. But mum also really liked her garden. So it was finding a balance between mum's garden growing and mum's happiness and dog not passing away. And so that one, I did a lot of experimentation as to what would deter snails. So I tested things like salt, sugar, like really kind of sharp, like bitumen rocks. And then I tested water motes and various different surfaces to see what, snails didn't like. And from that, I found that having a water moat is a really successful way to deter snails because they can't swim, as well as having copper. And this was something which is actually really, really interesting. And it was kind of already previously published, but if you have 2 strips of copper, not touching each other, but pretty close, when the snail goes across them, if it touches both of the copper strips, it actually creates a circuit and gives the snail a tiny little electrical zap, which, as you can imagine, they don't like. And so they head off the other direction, and dog's happy because dog's not passing away, and mum's happy because she has a garden.
And I mean, was that a case with the copper cables that was just something through your research online that you just saw some concepts out there that sort of, or someone had experimented this before and had found this, and you thought, I'm gonna see if this actually works?
Yeah, that was kind of what that stemmed from. And so, I discovered that a couple of these different things that people had previously suggested, they did work. And so it just came in combining them all into, a single device.
That's fantastic. So another one that I saw, which I think this is sort of one of the ones that started to get you a fair bit of attention, was the solar-powered water filtration system.
Yep.
So explain that one?
Yep. So it was, I suppose, a lot more recently. This one actually started way back when I was in year 5 with that particular video that you mentioned earlier. And it started from researching the output of solar panels. I think when I was in primary school, solar panels were the rage. Everyone was looking into renewable energy. We'd kind of just started getting them to levels which warranted purchasing them and putting them on your roof. And so I wanted to look at what affected their output. So how temperature affected it, how dirt on the solar panel would affect it, and how all these different aspects changed the power output that was coming from the solar panel. And so from that stemmed the idea of improving the output of a solar panel. And so I think that one was called the Reflecticon 3000.
I love it.
Very attractive device. Basically shiny aluminium foil in, if you can imagine, a cone of shame, like what a dog wears. Put that on a solar panel, and that's basically what the device was at that stage. And that was when I was in year 5, and I was able to increase the output of the solar panel by around 70%.
Wow.
Which was a big deal. And so moving fast forward to when I was in year 9 in high school, I went back to that idea and I thought, okay, now that I've created this extra power, what can I do with it? And so that one came from a bit of an idea which started, I suppose, a couple thousand years ago, which with ancient Egyptian water clocks. And I touched on it briefly in the TEDx talk. But basically what the idea was is if you can put water on the side of a solar panel with these Reflecticon 3000 on it as well, when that water, if you calibrate it just right, if that water drips out throughout the day, that side becomes lighter. And then if you have weights on the other side to kind of counterbalance it, the solar panel can rotate throughout the day and basically track the path that the sun makes. And so that increased the output even more in combination with that attractive reflective material. And then from there, I thought, what can I do with this extra power that, we're making? And because the water was already integrated into the dripping system, it kind of made sense to filter it and use that application in developing communities where there is scarcity of both water and power.
And I mean, once that's been developed, and I know that that started to get you a little bit of attention, has that concept been picked up and used anywhere, globally? Obviously, there's a lot of places around the world that could benefit from having something like this. Have you seen that get traction in any particular area?
Yeah, it's definitely needs a little bit more work. I actually, with a friend that I met through doing science competitions, we decided to work on it a little bit more over the past probably year or so. And we decided to incorporate creating sterile water as well instead of just drinkable water, incorporating a system where you're using that power to make sterilized water, which can be used for medical reasons like wound irrigation and for surgeries and sterilizing equipment in developing communities. And so we were in contact with the Australian Water Association, but that's still at very early stages. Hopefully in the coming years, we'll see that take a bit more traction, and then hopefully it can get out there.
One thing that I've noticed, and not being a part of this world whatsoever, is that a lot of these things take a long time. It's not something that you can just come up with a solution or an idea and then suddenly you can just put it into action, execute it, get it out there, and everybody's using it in happy days. There's a lot of development, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of trial and error, there's a lot of testing and challenging from other people as well, as to whether your idea and your concept is viable and can work. And there's so much that has to happen, and I guess a lot of hoops that you have to jump through as well before you can get to that point of success where it's being used on a wider scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the things which especially I've learned in the past year or two, with my most recent endeavor with Smart Armor. It's one of those things that when you first hear, like when there's, say, a big new drug development from a company and they're trying to get it to clinical trials, and they say, yes, this drug has been in development for 10 years. I always used to think, gee, what takes them so long? Why is it taking 10 years from the moment you discover something to the moment it's like, even starting a clinical trial? And it's definitely been something that I've had to learn the hard way, particularly with Smart Armor. I had this idea when I was in year 10. And so, I mean, I know that's only 2 years, but the amount of work that's been poured into it, from a research point of view, but also from a development point of view. It's at a stage where it might just starting to be getting used type thing, just because of all of the legal documentation, ethics documentation. There are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through these days to get something off the ground.
Well, it's a good segue, because Smart Armor's the thing that seems to be talked about quite a bit, and you've gotten a lot of attention because of it, and your TEDx talk touches on a fair amount of this. Do you want to explain what Smart Armor is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So Smart Armor stands for Scale Mail Armor for Radiation Therapy, and basically in the essence of what it's supposed to do is it during radiotherapy cancer treatment, particularly for breast cancer, the breast which is not being treated, which is called the contralateral breast, just a fancy name for it, receives what I call basically side effect radiation. It's radiation which theoretically shouldn't be delivered any dose to the other breast, but in reality, it does receive some radiation during treatment, which is inevitable. And so there was a study published which suggested that 1 in 14 patients who underwent radiotherapy for breast cancer developed a second primary cancer in that other breast later in their lifetime. And the study, I think one thing that I need to be a bit careful with is it didn't say that other cancer was caused by the radiation that was received during treatment. It could have been a number of things, genetics, predisposition, but it is a fact that other breast receives radiation, and any unnecessary radiation above what should be used to treat the tumour is harmful. So the Smart Armor is a device which can be laid on that other breast and is able to block up to 80% of the radiation, and it brings the radiation levels to within those which are recommended by the radiation therapy oncology group for safe practice. So where
I mean, obviously there's a problem that's there, and you could see that there's articles, and you could see some of the statistics, and as you said, and rightfully so, about being careful with the way that you explain it, is that don't know for sure that there's a direct link. However, there's obviously increased risk of problems due to the circumstances that this person is being put through. And so this is what you've put out there is a way to mitigate and reduce the risk of something happening. So it is something that, while you might not be able to draw a direct link, or you have to be very careful to, or careful not to, I should say. It is something that it's just providing more additional protection for the patient. But where did this come from? Like, was there a close family connection? Was there a story that had been brought to your attention that sort of triggered this curiosity again to look into this problem and see what you could do?
Yeah, this one actually just started with a conversation at the dinner table. My dad works in radiation therapy, and so he had come back after work one day and had said that it was just when this new research had come out, and he kind of brought it up in conversation. And like I said, I was in year 10 at the time, and I asked him, why don't you guys already use shields, or why isn't there already something protecting that other breast? And my dad said to me, and he said, there just isn't enough time. Unfortunately, they have, there's a lot of patients which need to be treated, and making a shield for that other breast is often quite hard because every single patient's treatment is unique. So each shield would need to be cut out and individualized and customized, which, as you can understand from an economic point of view, is very time consuming. Yeah. No, it costs a lot of money. And so I said, no, that's not okay. The quality of life of a patient is more important than economics and money. And so basically from there, I just decided that this was an injustice that I couldn't keep going on in my normal day-to-day life knowing that it existed. And so I did a lot of research and a lot of testing, and I think probably poured more time into this project than I have any other. And so that's where the smart armor was born.
And I guess you've mentioned this about the chainmail concept, and sort of going back to days gone by, many years ago, of that sort of material being used. And I guess that sort of solves the problem of it sort of working as a mold in a way, because of the flexibility or the movement of chainmail to be able to assist with that sort of hurdle or that problem that was identified.
Absolutely. I think it was just kind of that one was more of an epiphany moment, I suppose, because it does need to be a material that can fit every unique shape, every unique treatment, and chainmail was the starting point for that. And then moving on to scale mail from there, it does work perfectly.
Was there something that you were looking at? Were you going through books? Were you watching something on TV? Was there something where you sort of just you saw the image of it, or just the concept there, and you went, as you said, that epiphany moment, that light bulb moment? Was there something that you saw that sort of sparked it?
Yeah, it was actually my year 10 history class, and it was just looking through the textbook, and I saw this picture of medieval chainmail armor, and it was just kind of an epiphany moment where I thought, oh, that could work, and I started, looking at it a bit more deeply and thought, yeah, okay, this actually could work. And I tried chainmail, and at first the chainmail didn't actually work. So chainmail is made up of a series of loops. And so what I found was that some of the radiation was actually leaking through the holes in the loops where they'd been connected. But through my researching of chainmail, I happened to stumble upon scale mail, which is very similar, but instead of just using loops, it has those scales as well, which, because they all overlap, there's no leaking of radiation which can happen through any gaps and holes. So, yeah.
It's incredible. It's so cool. Like I think a lot of us when we're growing up and we start to understand the world around us and we start to see there's more than just our circle of friends and the people that we associate with, and we start to see the big bad world, as many people put it. There's that moment of it's really, I mean, it's really hard to adjust because you start to understand that there's a lot to life that isn't great. There's a lot of
Yeah.
things that should be improved and should be better, and some things that are just accepted as a normal way of life. And I think for a lot of people, you get that fire and that passion and you want to do something. But I think for a lot of people, especially younger people, you quickly understand that or you're at least you feel that you don't have any power, you don't have the
Mm.
capability to do anything, and that's due to not so much your support system, but it's just not having people around you that have the awareness or the right understanding, or providing the right resources to be able to to pursue something that means a lot to somebody.
Mm.
So it's a very small space of time that I've seen, and not long after that we sort of just fall into just everyday life, the rat race, and just we accept things for what they are. And then as we get older, change becomes a real pain and it becomes a threat, and we really struggle to do anything that's outside of what we're used to. So I think for you to be able to have this passion and to be able to question things, and especially at the dinner table, I love that. I reckon that's so cool. But then to not only just identify and say that's not right, but then to actually start investing time, and for you not to have the limitation in your mind that this, you can't do something about it. Like you actually can do something about it, and you are doing something about it now. So it's really cool to see. And I think many of us now, and even some of us that we're a few years out of school now, I think we all can still do something regardless of where we've been in the past. And I think we're all more than capable to question things and find alternative solutions.
Absolutely. I think that's probably one of my biggest messages. Quite often I get asked, if I'm doing a public speaking event, people ask me, what's your message? And for me, it's that I think everyone has a calling on their life to help other people. It doesn't matter what position you're in. It doesn't matter how far into life you are. I think it's never too late to help other people, whether that be through art or through history, or for me through science. I think it's important that we're always keeping the focus of others at whatever we're doing, and it's never too late to start that, because it doesn't matter who you are or where you've come from. Everyone has a story to tell, and everyone has something that they can contribute to change.
Absolutely. That was going to be one of my questions is, all this passion that you've got and all these achievements that you've made, putting yourself out there in the way that you are. I mean, there is that curiosity from my side about, the passion of the message behind it all. And there you go, you nailed it. And I think that's it's a pretty good motivator for anybody to draw a link and to understand how we can take something away from what you're personally doing yourself, and it's really, really good. One thing that I was going to ask you, because it's all part of being curious, is asking questions, and it's a new concept for me. Like only over the last several years where I've really sort of understood the power of asking questions. I think many of us for years, especially going through school. And I'm going to touch on something else as well, because you made a couple of comments publicly about school, and I really want to pick that apart a little bit. So I won't spend too much time on that. But we've always been fixated on memorizing things, and we've always been fixated on answers, but we don't put a lot of focus on questions and the right type of questions. From your experience and being curious and searching for solutions, what do you think makes a good question?
Yeah, I think the type of question that's a good question is one that makes more questions than answers. This is something I've come across a lot in my research. Quite often you start out expecting to come to a solution or expecting to come to an answer. But more often than not, it poses more questions and it creates more challenges than it does solves. And that's just been my experience. I think even when you look at smart armor, it seems like an endpoint. It seems like, that's a solution, that's an answer. But from my perspective, it has just opened even more doors and even more research opportunities. And I think that's the importance because, like you said, there is such a focus on memorizing things and coming up with the correct answer. But I think quite often more importantly is the process. And something that I'll never forget, more recently, I think it was just this past year, someone asked a question to a lecturer, a guest lecturer, that we had at a science program that I was on. And they asked, what happens when you fail? And it was quite a short question, quite a,
Profound.
Very stark, profound. Yeah, exactly. How do you answer that? And he responded in a way that I have never heard before. And what he said was, the purpose of science is to find truth. That's always been the way that we've looked at it. It's been to explain things about the world around us and find little truths. And what he said was, if you failure in what you're saying isn't actually failure, because even if something hasn't turned out the way that you wanted it to, chances are you've discovered something through the process. It might be that you've discovered something doesn't work and that something isn't the solution on the grand scheme of things. But he said, for me, that's not failure. That's just the beginning of a path to a new route and a new answer.
It's
discovering
a truth, isn't it?
Absolutely. It was something very profound, because I think when you come up against these things in, particularly as teenagers and as children, you can get quite down about failing as such, but more often than not, it is that process and it is the way that we look at failure which determines the outcome more than if you've actually failed.
No, absolutely. And I mean, touching on what I said before about some of the comments that I've seen you make in one article in particular, I'll chuck in the show notes so people can have a read because it's quite well done and it touches on a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about today. But you made a couple of comments about school and just how, and I'm totally just taking my interpretation of your comments because I don't have them in front of me, but it was something along the lines of, the system's a little bit outdated and there needs to be a bit more critical thinking. There's no real inquiry-based learning, and we're just a bit slow with sort of progressing and understanding the changes that are happening at an accelerating rate around us, and we're sort of just we're stuck in the past a little bit with an old format. Is that something? I mean, it's hard because you're coming to the end of the chapter of finishing off high school, and I'm only several years past high school, but it's something that I experienced a lot of frustration going through school, and a lot of it was based off the things that we've spoken about around memorizing, focusing on answers, not really explaining the context behind why we learn things, the relationships between different pieces of content and subjects, and really sort of grading ourselves based off the capability of being able to memorize data. And so a lot of the troubles that many of us had is when we exit and we either progress into university or any form of extra education or even just out into the workforce, many of us struggle because we don't have the context, we don't have the full understanding of why we've learnt the things that we've learnt. And so many people go to university, they defer, they never come back. Many people go into the workforce and just hit rock bottom because they just don't understand how to function in a completely different alien environment in comparison to school. And a lot of the things that are quite valuable to learn in school are just not taught in a way that can really bring true value. Is that, I mean, I am a few years past high school, and that's my experiences, and I'm a little bit bitter at times when I think about my time in school. But is that something that you felt as well going through sort of your time in high school?
Yeah, look, I think this is a very difficult subject and a very difficult topic to talk about, especially for those reasons that you said. It's funny that you mentioned the article, because I do know the exact article that was, and I remember actually from that article, I had a fair bit of backlash from my teachers.
I was going to ask about
at
that.
The school. Yeah, and it was. I think that was my first experience as what you would coin a run-in with the media, and because that was speaking at an event, and it was my first. I was invited to speak on a panel. I was very excited. It was my first time that I'd been invited to speak in a panel type interview situation, and I was very excited because, you know, in my mind, if you get invited to speak on a panel, that means that you must be an expert on something. So I was very excited. And the panel was talking about the implementation of augmented reality and virtual reality in schools. And so me, you know, obviously was coming from the perspective of a person who was in school. And one of the questions that they asked was, have you seen augmented reality in schools? And my answer was no. I think I'm at that age where all of this, you know, up and coming coding and augmented reality and virtual reality, I've missed that. I only started learning coding 2 months ago when I was on a science program, and part of it forced me to learn how to code. And so a lot of my comments, I suppose, came from that place of I hadn't seen augmented reality in schools. And so all of this up and coming technology that we're using in places like the Sydney Harbour Bridge, a lot of people don't know, but the Sydney Harbour Bridge actually has trackers which have a lot of AI, artificial intelligence coding into them, which are tracking, you know, the strength of the bridge, how many cars are passing over it, if there are any weak spots that need repairing. And they're doing this every single day, 24/7 hours.
Wow.
And so it was coming from that perspective of we're using this virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence in our industry and in our everyday life, but I hadn't seen any of it in schools. And so that's kind of the perspective that was taken when I was saying the school system is outdated because it's not catching up with this augmented reality, visual reality technology. But it was an interesting article because a lot of what I was said was taken out of that context of virtual reality and AI. So I do remember going to school the next day and I was actually called into the principal's office.
Oh, no.
Which, for me, I was always kind of a bit of a teacher's pet, so I never liked being in trouble. So that had me absolutely quaking in my boots.
This is new ground. This is new ground for you.
that was new ground for me that day. But what happened when I went in is the principal actually said to me, and she said, basically, we know that what you've said has been said out of context. We know that you aren't the type of person who would say these things. And apparently, you know, there were some teachers who had taken it a little bit to heart. But I do want to clear up. A lot of what I said was coming from that perspective of not seeing virtual reality in schools. And I have had fantastic experiences with a lot of my teachers. You know, I've had a lot of them, particularly in the last 2 years, go up and beyond what they need to do, because I've missed a lot of time. I've had a lot of time off school with a lot of my outside commitments. They've gone up and beyond what they needed to do to ensure that I've had that kind of support there. So, but I will admit a lot of what I did say, I do also stand by and agree with, that a lot of the school system is memorizing. And for a person like me, a lot of people say, oh, don't worry about your exams, you'll do fine, you're so smart, those type of things. I'm terrible at memorizing. It's probably the worst aspect of it. You ask, it's almost like if you tell me to memorize something, my brain goes, fantastic, let's not memorize it. And so I have struggled a fair bit with that memorizing thing, with that memorizing aspect of it, because a lot of school at the moment is memorize this and we will mark you on how well you can regurgitate the textbook, which is something I think the school system is learning with. For example, there's a new science course which I'm disappointed that I'm missing out on, but the new science extension course is a research project. It's create a research question, do your own type of research, and then come up with the solution, which is precisely what I do with my own time and with my own science research projects. So I think there is still a way to go with our school system. I do think that there are some aspects where inquiry-based learning and critical thinking, could be implemented perhaps a little bit more effectively than they are at the moment. But I think it's changing, and I think people in power are starting to realise that it's having ramifications when people get into uni and the workforce, that it does need to change.
It's unfortunate. It's a model that's been around for so many years, and it's done the job, especially when we were primarily a civilization, especially in the Western world, where we were very industrial. We all had normal jobs where we would rely on an employer. We work in a factory or an office. And now with technology, it's just like a lot of stuff's getting automated. There's less of the sort of lower, not even lower tier jobs. A lot of the sort of technical skilled based jobs are reducing because we've found efficiencies. We've found ways to improve things and do the same task 10 times quicker than we were doing before. So, which is progress, but as a result, a lot of people are finding that they no longer have the same type of employment that they had or have been used to for so long. So the school system used to work to help that type of era of employee, and now things are changing. And unfortunately, it's a big ship. It's a big ship to steer, and it's going to take a long time to really see dramatic changes, because we're changing at least 100 plus years of doing things a particular way, and it's just, we've got to change mindsets. We've got to, unfortunately, some people are going to have to learn the hard way, and we're going to have to chase our tails a bit. But I think I think I've definitely seen examples of people that are teachers or people that are going through the system now and coming out with great outcomes, and I think even your story and the context of you explaining your story of always just being curious, and it's something that's inside you, and a lot of the stuff you do outside of school, your schooling environment has no doubt complemented and assisted you with excelling in the way that you have, because if it didn't, then I don't think you would have achieved as much as you would have if the schooling system had been such a detrimental impact on your life.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that there's definitely a long way to go, but we have come a very long way from where we've been, and there are things which work with the schooling system, but there are also things that don't work, and that we'll need to adjust for the changing world around us.
Absolutely, definitely. Before I wrap it up, I noticed that you were recently over at MIT in the US. So my understanding, you'll have to correct me because I don't know exactly how it works, but you're finishing up this year. Are you going to be going to MIT as of next year?
No. So I wish. The program at MIT was an independent 6-week program where we were invited over to MIT for that period of time and performed scientific research under a professor whilst we were there. So whilst I would love to head to MIT next year, Unfortunately, I don't think that will be the case.
So what's the plan then for you as far as obviously I'm making a big assumption here, but I'll put money on it. You'll be going tertiary education next year.
Yes.
Yeah, and is that still something that's pending at this point in time, just due to the time of year?
Yeah. Look, I know what I would like to do,
Yeah,
but not where. So I'm
yeah,
planning at the moment on doing a double degree, a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Arts.
yeah.
Um, I'm not sure where that will be just yet. I think that'll depend on whether I stay at home or whether I end up moving away, but we'll see.
Very exciting. I mean, it's such a crazy time in anybody's life in general, regardless of the circumstances, because
Mm.
as I mentioned earlier, there's just so many changes that happen in that space of time of just being a teenager and just trying to adjust to everything that's going on around you, and it happens so quickly. To amplify it even more in your context with all the things that you've been doing in addition to just living a normal life, it's a pretty crazy time, and no doubt really exciting. And even just from my perspective, just having a look, just even a glimpse into what your life has been all about. I mean, it's quite exciting just to sort of be a spectator and just see what's going to be coming up in the next few months and the next few years and beyond.
Thank you. I can definitely say it's exciting for me.
All right, cool. And then before I wrap it up, one last question. You have received so many awards. I started writing a list because I thought, oh, I'm just going to make a couple of notes here and just some notable things. And I think the main one that I could see, the most recent one, or probably not the most recent one, you probably had a bunch more recently, but you had the 2018 New South Wales Young Australian of the Year. And I think that was in the beginning of the year. But do you have like this epic trophy cabinet? Do you have like do you have a room of just a shrine to yourself of all your achievements? Because I was going through this, I was trying to compile a list. I just gave up after a while because I thought I'm not even getting them all. There's so many that I mean, maybe I'm over exaggerating, I don't know, but have you got a collection somewhere?
Yeah. Look, I don't have a collection, but I can definitely say that Mum does. Quite often, I walk past and I kind of cringe a little bit. But my mum definitely does keep a record of all these things, and is definitely, I think, a stereotypical proud mother.
Oh,
but
good on her. Good on her. I mean, that's great. And yeah, I think that's one of the things. I think a really cool thing growing up is that it's one of those little things that gives you a spark of excitement and motivation is when you get an accolade of some sort. And I mean, for you, it's probably got to a point now where the achievement's fantastic, but you probably just don't need the tangible item anymore. And so you can pass it on to your mum, and your mum can add it to the collection. So yeah, that's cool. All right, well, I'll let you go. I'm really curious to see how the next several months and even the years are going to be for you, but I'm absolutely impressed. And when I first contacted you a few months ago, I was just in awe of what you've been able to do in such a short space of time in the grand scheme of things. So it's really, really inspiring. Well done. Congratulations. And looking forward to seeing what happens next.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Wow, hey, how incredible is that? I don't know about you folks, but when I was 17, I was a bit of a handful. I was a misfit. I had the attention span of a goldfish. Pretty much nothing's changed, but it's just incredible to see somebody achieve so much in such a short space of time. It's really, really cool. It's very exciting and quite inspirational to see somebody using their skills and their talent not only to push themselves forward as a career and grow and learn, but to get out there and help a lot of other people as well. To have that awareness is just really, really cool. And hopefully, we can bottle that up and use it ourselves, because just a really, really inspiring story and an inspiring person. So well done, Macinley. I am pumped to see where you're going to end up. I have no idea, but it's going to be pretty amazing things. So well done for all the things that you've achieved so far. As always, you can check out more about Macinley by going to her website, which is macinleybutson.com. And as always, which I was meant to say, you can go to the show notes over at andysocial.net, where I put all of the links and resources from every guest that I've had on this podcast to date. So a great way to learn more about these amazing people and further support them as well. Now, before we wrap it up, as mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, if you are listening to this episode bang on release date, this Saturday, November 3rd, we are playing, we being Lord, if you haven't caught my drift, are playing our last show for 2018 at the Bullface Stag in Sydney. That is Saturday, November 3rd. We are headlining day 2 of the Steel Assassins Festival. So if you are in Sydney and you want to check out day 1 as well, there's a really cool lineup there. Hobbs Angel of Death have unfortunately pulled out, but the legends in Desecrator are now headlining day 1. So both Hobbs and Riley from Desecrator have been on the podcast previously. So make sure you go and listen to those episodes if you haven't already. It's an amazing lineup of bands both days. We're headlining day 2. If you want to grab tickets, you can grab them from moshtix.com.au, lord.net.au, andysocial.net. If you get lost, let me know. I'll flick you a link. But please buy tickets in advance before the show if you're thinking about coming. I know I'm a broken record, but buying tickets in advance is a great way to support original music here in Australia. It legitimizes the show. It secures funds for the promoter, for the venue, for the artists. It just ensures that the legitimacy of live music continues to grow and strengthen in this country. And to be honest, it's one less thing that you have to shell out for when you rock up on the day as well. So there's a lot of pros there. So, go and buy a ticket, please. And if you see me there, come and grab a beer with me and we'll have a quick chat, and you can watch me prance around on stage being a heavy metal warrior. That is this Saturday, November 3rd, 2018. Now, before we wrap it up, as always, if you want to support the podcast, you can do so in a whole range of ways: rates, reviews, social media love, messages of encouragement. Share this podcast around to anybody who might enjoy just one of the guests that have been on this podcast so far. There's been 150 plus episodes of this podcast so far. I can't believe I've done that many. I thought I would have given up after the first 3 or 4, but here we are. And I thank you so much for everybody that continues to spread the word and get these episodes out there to heaps of different people. And hopefully, listening to this one with Macinley, you'll feel inspired to pass it on to somebody that you know who might need a little dose of inspiration as well. So have a think about somebody out there that might get value from hearing Macinley's story. Anyway, that's enough. I've probably got a bunch of updates to rattle on, but I cannot remember them. So I'm going to wrap it up for this week. Thanks, as always, for the support. It means a hell of a lot. I'm loving this podcast, and I'm loving everything it's doing for me personally, but I'm loving the feedback I'm getting from you guys as well. It's been really, really cool, really fulfilling, really rewarding. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And until next week, ta-ta, folks.